Okay, welcome in, Eric. I have just started the recording. This is Design 350. It's the lecture section for Thursday, September 2nd. And I don't think I wrote down what we're going to be doing today, so I probably need to keep up with those. But you'll see from our weekly list that we've sort of talked a little bit about fair housing last time and a little bit about youth and foster care. And so now we're going to talk about land planning and survey as the primary things to work on. And then I'll also do a little bit of review of the discussions or preview of the discussions. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is really a high level overview type stuff. I mean, we're looking at these topics from way far out in generalities, and our goal is by the end of the semester we've got the details, many of the details down. Of course, these are huge subjects, and I really should have put land planning in front of survey because survey is what you do to support land planning. But let's go ahead and just get into it. I've got most of these things open that we'll want to look at. And so I'm going to cruise through the readings and give you sort of my thoughts and my take on the key points that you might take away. So if you've got a pen and a paper or a Windows notepad or whatever they use on Macs to take some notes, you might want to do that, save you from having to go back and listen through this again. So here we go. So let's talk about land use and what that means. Okay. And so what we're really talking about is management and modification. Okay. We want to manage and modify the land around us. Otherwise, we're just kind of cruising around and hoping for the best. Now, we know that for many thousands of years, management and modification have driven in a direction that maybe changed things a lot. And right now we're seeing some of that as climate change. And we're still struggling mightily with management and modification of land in a way that could maybe be more effective and advance a little bit. But regardless, when we talk about land use, we're not talking about, oh yeah, I walked across it, so I used. No, we're talking about management and modification into a built environment. Okay. And a built environment can be fields and pastures and managed woods if we're really managing them. Okay. So 20 million buffalo running across the plains wasn't considered land use. That was just the state of the land. Killing all of those bison and buffalo so that we could graze our cattle and sheep in certain sectors that were set aside for certain people is land use. And you can get the idea that when I talk about land use, our history is probably, in my mind, not stellar. So anyway, that's why we want to talk about this in a certain way. So it's been around for a long, long time. Okay. And I'll bet you it's been even more than this 10,000 years. I'll bet you there's been something, but that's when we say history, that's when it says that we can find some sort of evidence in some fashion that land use was managed or planned or there were modifications. Okay? So that's what we mean by land use. Then we have something called regulations. Regulations are how governments or the big dogs, whatever group that is, sets up rules. Okay, regular is the Spanish word for kind of rule or law, and I'm sure it goes back to some Latin regula that meant a rule or a law. So it's the rules and the laws that we go by. And of course, you can imagine that whoever is in charge at any one time wants to make sure that those rules and regulations are the benefit of whatever stakeholder group that they happen to think is the most cool and groovy of all the groups and the people. So regulation is a general term for making the rules, for managing and modifying our built environment. Okay. So that's kind of cool. And now it goes on to talk about, what it's like in the United States and how much areas are set aside for what, and knowing that these things are able to be captured and tracked and seen through time and compared is good. Having data is all about management. So the more that we can look at how things have gone and changed, the better. The better. Okay. Now, there are some really cool programs, and we'll be getting some from our Design Hub group, one called Social Explorer, that can take census tracts and all the way back to 1790 and track this for us and make a cool little chart that shows through time how things go. So that's kind of neat that we can do that. The data is there for some. Okay, so that's important. It has a lot to do with the environment, right? Major impact on environment: water, soil, nutrients, plants, animals. Of course, we also know our air and I should call it our atmosphere rather than our air. And those things are pretty important. And there was a group in Europe in about 1700, right after Descartes came out with his principles for studying and science, that first made a connection between trees and our ability to have a healthy environment. And this was, and Ben Franklin was one of them, and Jefferson was another, and there were tons of them, and they were all these cool European free thinkers that found this weird link between plants and air. And they proved it by killing things in jars where there were plants and where there were no plants, and where there were healthy plants and not healthy plants. And so that link is not new. And they, in the very, very first ones, and Darwin was in with these guys, and they were called the Enlightenment thinkers, first started talking about this in the early 1700s, that our science needs to look at resources on more than can we get it and use it. That idea that all resources are there for people to use started being questioned at least by the Europeans in 1700. Now, we know that many other groups innately understood that. We can see it in their writings. Shen Nung from about 500 BC specifically said that in China. So sometimes we say we're really advanced and we're only 2,200 years behind some guy in China who was a scientist and brought all this up and actually had formulas for it, not in the algebra that we would think of, but had books and stuff about what you should do and when to make sure that it'll keep going and all this kind of stuff. So the environment is a big deal, and land use and the environment are obviously so closely intertwined that it's kind of like duh. And if you can't say duh, I think you've really missed something in your educational experience. If you just can't understand that what is around you has an immediate effect on you and you have an immediate effect back. Now, what you do about that is far more complex than duh. And so then we talk about urban growth. Urban that did start many thousands of years ago, where people started gathering in groups that were not just family group or tribe group, and started compacting themselves and figuring out, okay, I'm a baker and you're a farmer and I shear sheep and things like that led to more and more urban growth. And there are many cool studies to show whether that was self-inflicted prison or not. And urban growth boundaries are really, really interesting and how we use them. And so here's a whole bunch of things to look at if you'd like to. Do you have any comments on that, Eric? Have you done some study on this or I know obviously in horticulture, you're one of the stakeholders that in environment. Have you done any formal study with this?
Not too much formal studying. I would say more just being aware of like what you're ordering and what you're doing, what effects they have. It's just the deeper thinking, like whether it's besides just where it's coming from, like the whole, does it fit, and maintenance, and
right,
like the whole, like that kind of stuff. But not a ton of this. I think you're more like, you were definitely kind of doing some of this last year.
Yep.
So I've definitely, I got to delve more into it.
Okay,
Sure.
well that's cool. Well, we'll be getting into it here, but that's basically land use. What you should take away, obviously, if you were looking at this, is this very first one. There we go. Land use involves the management and modification of natural environment or wilderness into built environment. And of course, from there, you go crazy looking at stuff. So now let's look at land use planning. And this is interesting because zoning is part of land use planning. It's a methodology that's used. So let's look at land use planning. And yet land use planning, here it is right off the top of again, is a process of regulating the use of land by a central authority. Now, here's the cool part. In an effort to promote more desirable social and economic outcomes, as well as more efficient use of resources. Well, now we could put 20 people in a room and have 40 ideas about what that means or what's best for that. Desirable social outcomes, desirable environmental outcomes, more efficient use of resources. Oh my gosh. And if you study Henry Ford, you will see that this can be fraught with danger, where he was totally into efficient use of resources. He was one of the greatest use and reuse guys ever. But his idea of desirable social was him. And he actually made people dress up like he would dress up and say things like him. And he had a cadre of about 150,000 people working for him at his plant in Michigan. 10,000 of them were sort of Gestapo that went around and made sure that in their own homes, people ate the food that Ford said they should eat, drank the things, read the things, listened to the stuff, did the social exercises. So right here, that's a big thing right there. So know that this part is the point of contention, and where stakeholders all need to somehow agree. And that's why we have a regulating authority that also helps us set up these clues. What does this mean? So in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, our central regulation said desirable social outcome is segregation. And that was done through the central authority in a process called redlining. Now, we think that we've progressed quite far from there. We've had some good federal laws and things like that. But that concept is still being presented as the valid social thing by many central authorities. So, and it's happening right now, right? There's huge pushback against SB 9, which is from our state government, the central authority that does regulate the use of land. And there is this incorrect thought that local control is the proper central authority. And they're trying to eliminate the state central authority and say, no, you cannot tell us what the social and environmental outcomes are to be. That's up to us because we, quote, own this land. And so this is still a constant thing that we go through. It would probably be a very boring world if it wasn't. But this is a big deal right here. Who is the regulating authority? What is the desirable social, environmental, and resource use outcomes? And so whenever you hear something about land planning or housing or new developments or taxes on this and that and the other thing, those are all tied up with this item right here. And the balance, this is a typical engineering problem, right? Most of these are conflicting requirements. Okay? The use of resources usually gives you a detrimental environmental outcome. Okay? Social outcomes are usually considered good for one group, bad for another group. If you're in the bad for the other group, that's kind of a hit, and it can be a problem. So these three things in your land planning should always be looked at. But the goal right now for our class is to understand who regulates, who is the central authority, and you looked at some of the fair housing and some of that. That's about social outcomes and efficient use of resources. And it's becoming to be understood that fair housing also has an environmental outcome. And then these are some ways that people look at doing it. Okay, but for this class and this level and where we're at right now, this is the thing that we want to look at. Okay, urban planning is in the urban area. That's where people are packed together over some certain number of people per square foot, and you want it efficient and ethical to prevent land use conflicts. And one of the ways that we do that is with something called zoning, which we're going to hear more about next week. But people, urban planners have always figured that if things are done in zones, they can control it and think about it better. And then they say, in this zone, you can do this type of activity and this and this and this and this and this. Okay, and usually there's some sort of a plan. Right, so that's our land use planning as it relates to land use. Okay, so we're back to, we want to manage and modify the natural environment, and we want to do that through a process that regulates land use by a central authority. And you can imagine if everybody just had their own little lot and did whatever they want, this guy's putting in, something right, building something next to you that impinges on you, and you do something that bothers your neighbor, and then the guy next to you put in a nightclub and there's no parking, it makes sense that we would want to regulate that so that we eliminate or reduce conflicts. That's the whole goal. Reduce those conflicts. So there we go. Keep this one in mind. Promote desirable social, environmental outcomes, as well as efficient use of resources. That's tough too, right? If this was easy to do, 3,000 years ago, we would have had it down. So I am not, I'm not making a claim on anything yet of what is good or bad or indifferent and best methods or best practices for doing this. I'm essentially making you aware of this. Okay, and then this is really important. This does not represent a worldwide view of this subject. Most of this is about the United States. Okay, and so you can think about this a little bit. And you can look at this pros and cons thing, but I think I've hit the parts that I want to do. So now we're going to talk about something called regional planning. Okay, and if you think about it, it's on a broad scale. It's a region. So Carmichael has its cool planning group, and City of Sacramento and Sacramento County and Yolo County and Davis. And there are certain things that they definitely want to take care of on their own, but there are some planning things that are big that affect all of them. And that's particularly, you're going to see it with transportation, industry, wastewater treatment, sewage, water use, air quality, all these things that kind of, what a city does can really affect its neighboring cities. or, you know, what a large community like Carmichael, Arden Arcade, Elk Grove, something like that. And it's really good to coordinate those plans. And so that's called regional planning. And each region, as it is identified by the state of California, the state is our central planning authority. They do tell us what you can and can't do on a planning scale. And they do give certain authorities to certain groups to do that work. And they have given a number of regional authorities the authority and responsibility to follow that goal that you saw up above. Okay? So the Sacramento region would be our regional planning authority. And that's made up of the planning authorities in a council of governments, regional council or council of governments. And we belong to one called SACOG, Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And the major government groups all have a seat in this council. And so that would be, you know, City of Sacramento, City of Davis, and depending on how they are grouped and they do things, you know, Sacramento County may have different stakeholders that go in, and then we go beyond that. I think I don't really remember who we have. I don't really get into it that much, but you know, like El Dorado, Placer, Yolo County, I think Yuba and Butte and Sutter counties are all part of the SACOG, so that when they're talking about doing grand, cool things, they bring it to each other's attention, and sometimes they can coordinate. You can imagine that the new highway from Elk Grove up to Placerville, that was all done through SACOG, and the coordination and the planning and the money and the governmental, you know, approvals and all that kind of stuff were done through SACOG, through these differing groups. There's going to be a widening of the Yolo bypass, and Davis has been asking for that, and so has Solano County for years. And SACOG approved that about 5 years ago and got the funding all set up. And I think they're in planning and design stage now, and they're due to start construction in about 4 to 5 years. So, you know, so the Council of Governments, and it's like, who would have known? Who, you know, you never see that. You never see anything about that in the news. SACOG did this, SACOG did that, right? Or your regional council of governments approved this, or there's a meeting, you can go. They're not big news people, but they are the funding stream. And they're actually the ones that get legislative approvals and budget approvals for major proposals and grants. So they might write a thing for the legislature that says, okay, look, all of the SACOGs want $20 million to be able to improve, you know, something in poverty-stricken areas by making innovation centers. And the state will go, oh, that's a good idea. We can plug $20 million into our budget. and SACOG, you get this, and LACOG, you get that, and da 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 da. And then there's going to be a pot of, let's say $1 million. And then our regional council will ask for proposals. And maybe Davis will do one, and maybe Oak Park will do one, and maybe something like that. And that money will flow. So that's how council of governments work. So that's kind of cool. So we work from land planning, managing and modifying our built environment, which is cool, to the idea that we have to have some sort of planning from a central authority. And then we find that there's some sort of regional planning that gets done because the state can gather funds and have ideas and start talking about what are these social and environmental outcomes that the state is looking at. And by the way, the federal government has a place in this too, but we're not talking about that now. That's where the FHA and stuff comes in. And then the state devolves down to a regional planning. Okay? And regional planning is very often done through this thing called Council of Governments. And they are given a mandate. They are approved. They are set up through the state. And each participant in the council has their own approved planning process. Okay, so local authorities are approved through the Council of Government, which are approved through the state. Local authorities don't have local decision making other than applying the rules and asking if their plan works. So as an example, every couple of years you have to do something called the housing element of your planning process that addresses certain data that has been collected in the last census. And that housing element has to get provided to your Council of Governments. Well, first it gets approved by a city council. The land planners put it in front of the city council. The city council says, yes, that's good. And then the land planning council can send it to their next level up, which is usually Council of Governments. And Council of Governments includes that in their regional report to the state. And the regional reports to the state, they look at these and that is instrumental in choosing where money flows. So is that pretty? Have you ever heard about all that before, Eric?
Some of that, but not a lot of that. No, I mean it's easy not to really, if you don't pay attention, like to miss. There's so much interesting stuff. There's
right,
and you know if it's not done correctly, obviously by the right people.
Yep.
Where that can go, and that's not cool.
Right.
So yeah, it's actually quite fascinating.
It really is, and so sometimes we get very upset with our planning departments for, picking on some stupid rule that we think is really ridiculous. And that's just because we don't know. We don't know that it's not ridiculous because we don't.
Well, yeah, the idea,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the one that really got to me was when you said, it will benefit one group, but not another. It's like, yeah, if you really, really think about that, there's always something that's going to be affected, even if it's just the animals in the area or the, the ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, and so I'll use this is going on in Davis as we speak. It's been going on for 2 or 3 or 4 years. Davis is kind of like this no growth place and all this kind of stuff. And that's kind of a problem. But about 5 years ago, a developer put a development on our planning agenda that said, oh, we're going to do a retirement thing because there's not enough retirement place in Davis. And guess what? We're going to make it for Davis residents. You have to have a close tie to Davis to get one of our places. Isn't that cool? We're really thinking, and it's a problem in Davis. Tons of people that retire from the Davis School District or working downtown or working at the university cannot afford to retire in Davis. It's a problem. And so these guys, oh, it's so great. We're going to do this. It's going to be so cool. And they promise us, and they put it on the ballot with that promise. And of course, Davis said, oh, yeah, sure, cool. And then it got to the planning department. They said, well, you violate the Fair Housing Act. Right? Davis is 98% white. And so you're only allowing 98% white people to buy in this place. You are violating federal law, and not only violating federal law, what you're doing is just plain wrong, right? And so people are going, but wait, but wait, no, we want to help the people that are retiring in Davis. Yes, but you can't do it in a way that discriminates against everybody else. And so it got slammed at the SACOG. No approval at all. Right, and so they've gone around. They're trying to figure out some way to still be essentially.
That's a tough one.
Yeah,
that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is, right? But guess what? It can be done, and there are many groups that have offered solutions. But guess what? They don't make the profit margin that the developer is looking for, and so the developer is saying no. We'll scrap the project. And the other people are going, come on. So you're making 48% margin instead of 50, and 50 is your benchmark? Well, too bad. Right? You know, so it's really,
that's sad.
It's going right back to this one, right? Social, environmental. Oh, and that was the other thing, is they wanted a variance on the percent shade because they were going to put up solar panels in place of shade instead of solar panels in addition to shade, because it costs more to put a solar panel on the top of a building than to just put 4 posts up and do it. So there was another one where it ran. So this was hard stuff, right? It is really, really, really hard. Man, but you're just gonna see some of it. And the goal of this class is that you understand how hard it is, and that you be open-minded with these things. And when you're doing a design, you try to think of some of these a little bit ahead of time to try to mitigate them and find a way ahead of time to make it a little bit more easy to swallow. Right? So, you know, that one though was just really like, okay, you know, Davis has always been known as what they call a citadel city. One group of people live here, and that's actually, in most planning thoughts, not a great thing. You know, we have so little diversity that it's incredible. And we're not making much advancement on it. So this is one particular event that makes some sense. So now, once you've done that, and you've got this thing called regional planning that your local planning group goes into, you need to have good information about what is where and who owns what and where are the boundaries. And that's why we put the surveying class in with the land planning class. Survey and land planning. Because the surveying helps us understand where boundaries are. Okay? And so now But now we don't actually do much of that kind of surveying. Okay, the type of surveying that we do tells you that based on something that's already on the site, where do we put other stuff? But just so you know, usually what most people think of as surveying, and we did this property line stuff, is all about where are the boundaries. Later on, we're going to do what's called architectural surveying, which is more about, or engineering surveying, which is what we do. It's like, okay, here's a corner of a building and I need to put another building in. I'm going to make sure that it's spaced appropriately and properly compared to that other building. So that's the type of survey that we're going to do. We are not going to do establishing maps and boundaries for ownership. We're going to work off of those ownership boundaries and put stuff in. Okay? And now you'll see we're going to use this theodolite. That's what we're going to use. Although we're really in this first week pretending that we're doing sort of like GIS, little position sensors, but we're going to be using theodolites and a little bit, maybe if we get our drone guys going, some LiDAR, but certainly with some GIS and for sure with some drones. Okay, so surveying helps us determine very critically to the correct precision where something is or where it should be put. Okay, so that's what our surveying classes do. And then here's just a little bit so you get kind of an idea. Now, most of our students, few of them become surveyors, but many of the people that come to us looking for hires do want somebody to either be a survey tech, a survey assistant, or a project assistant that helps the surveyors. Okay, so I thought it would be good for you guys to look up, what does a surveyor do? Okay, so what do they do? What's the environment like? How do you become one? This is not true. They don't need a bachelor's degree. This is true. You need a license. Most surveyors can take 4 or 5 classes and then work for a civil engineer or a certified surveyor for a certain amount of time, sort of like architects do, and earn credit to qualify for their license exam. Okay? That's pretty good because most surveyors work part of the year. That's probably 6 months worth of work to make that $65,000. And then they're free to go do something else. There is a huge need for surveyors right now. They say it's projected to grow 2%. And that's really, really interesting because people are quitting right and left. It is difficult. It's hard work. The drone guys are taking over. That's making it a little bit easier. And so sometimes the name gets changed to GIS specialist, this, that, and the other thing. But we're doing tons of survey work. And then we're going to use something sort of like that. We're going to use really the theodolite. Wherever that was right here. You could go to this one if you want to. Okay. And it's really cool because it takes horizontal, azimuth, and incline. And you can also read distance too. So it's kind of a cool piece of equipment. And ours doesn't look too far off of that. Ours is fairly close. Okay. So there we go. That's your lecture on land use and land planning that will set the stage for everything else that we're going to do. Guys, how do you feel about that? Is that kind of clear? Give you a kind of a direction and set the stage for what this portion of our class is?
I think so, yes.
Cool. All right, then let's go ahead and look at what the discussions are. Where there they are, my discussions. Oh my gosh, I didn't put these up into here. Let me move these up into here. They should be in the pinned part, and these ones should be down here. I don't know why those aren't moving for me. I'll go change those ones in a little bit. So we've got 3 things to look at. This production one is fairly straightforward, and it's a parcel map thing, right? And you can find parcel maps, and I give you a little link here to go to. So there's the parcel map, and here it is. It's near American River College, so that's kind of cool. And I want you to just sort of look at it. And if you can really, read these and use these correctly, it really helps your submittal. And so go to the, and just pick a parcel. I don't care where you go. And I want you to look at what's available on here. So let's say I'm going to pick this parcel right here. And I picked that parcel on purpose because it belongs, or used to belong. Let me see if I've got the right one there. Might have the wrong one there. I'm pretty sure that's the right one. Nope, it's this one right here. I'm going to pick this one right here. 4632. That belongs to one of our professors, or used to. And it's just kind of a cool, it's nearby. But look at all the things that we can find. Zoning. Flood zone. That one's really important for insurance. Oh, look at this. You can, it didn't take me to that one. I think I can get to that one and get a lookup of that page. Oh, there it is. Look at, I can even get the original parcel map. Oh my gosh, that is so cool that we can get all that. But this is really important. Zoning. How is it zoned? RD2 residential. That tells you what you can do with that property. You can't do whatever you want. What is the land use? Here's the general plan of what they're trying to do in this area. And so if you want to do something on this, it's good to know what these are, to know that your proposal will meet what the local planning authority is wanting to do. Nothing's up on planning right now. Look, here's actually the description of that. Oh, that is so cool. There's even more stuff. There's a survey of record that was done in 1910 and 1912. Oh my gosh, that's been in there forever. Some current values, building permits. Nope, they don't have any online right now. There's some, this is, Housing and Redevelopment Agency. Ooh, Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. That's important information if you're trying to figure out some stuff. Okay. South Sacramento Conservation Agency. So these are all things that go into making sure that your plans are in accord with the current set of planning. So I just want you to go pick a spot. I don't care where it is. Pick a parcel and then see what it looks like, see what's available, see what kinds of things that come up for you. You don't even have to know what they mean. Just sort of go, wow, look at all that stuff. Now, I'll tell you, Sacramento County has probably one of the best GIS sites in the state. You go outside of the Sacramento area and you won't have this easy of a site to use. So congratulations to Sacramento. Okay? And so just make a little recording that says, hey, look, I found this one. I found a site. And look at these things that I can see from it. Once you've done that one, I want you to look at this one and go, okay, Sacramento was redlined. And if you want to know about redlined, here's a little bit about it. Okay, supposedly you've heard something about redlining if you looked at the readings. Okay, and you can think, and you may or may not know, but you could look it up for Sacramento, the area that you picked. Was this a redlined area? And what sort of investment do you think got made in that area? So as an example, I can tell you for sure, Del Paso Heights was redlined. Okay? You could only get into certain parts of that near McClellan if you had an FHA loan, and it was reserved for white people. Now, of course, through the years, that has changed, and right around it was the area that was allowed for redlined development. And so you can see which parts in the Del Paso area was redlined and which parts weren't. And it's plain as day, and you can see it. And it's because investment was funneled to certain areas: transportation, schools, libraries, museums, all that kind of stuff. Shopping centers, things like that were put in one area and they weren't in others. And so you can just look at your area and just say whether you think that was a redlined area or not. And then we'll be able to go back and find out. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. And then the last one is to just look up a job skill. So, think about, what am I asking for on this one? Hold on a sec. Oh, got it. Okay. What I want you to do is think about what information might be useful to get a planner to approve your submittal. So you've looked at maps, you've looked at areas, you've looked at this kind of stuff, and start thinking, okay, what might be useful? Okay, and then think about how that'll be presented. What kind of drawings might be needed? And then think about how you'll make those drawings. Okay, and I'll tell you, this is real critical for customizing your job application. If you're applying to jobs in this area, is to really know what kind of software packages a planner might need. Do you need maps? Do you need data in charts? Do you need historical data presented through time? Do you need proposal drawings? Okay, and what kind of software packages helps you do those? Let me know if you can do them, and then tell me what you think. Oh man, that's all really important stuff. I really need to know more about GIS packages. And I think I want to do that. Or, this is all about AutoCAD and Revit and drone deploy and getting that data down to my packet. So this parcel map information, I'm going to take information off of this parcel map and get it into drawings. I've got a parcel. It's part of a parcel map. I've got tons of information. I need to present it in my proposal through drawings and charts and documents. I may want to have history also. Do I have the tools? Can I draw? Can I do it? What have I got going on? Okay. So that one is just thinking about. Okay. Who, what, where, when, and why for a project. Who is pretty easy.